Morning light filtered through the curtains, and the remnants of a relentless headache forced me out of bed. I stumbled into the bathroom, swallowing 2 aspirin and bracing myself by the sink, hoping my queasy stomach would settle. I'm Ron Jameson, and yesterday turned my world upside down. After a long day at work, I walked into our home, unaware of the emotional wreckage waiting for me. Chrissy, my wife, looked at me with a mixture of love and sadness. She confessed she had been involved with another man for the past year. She described their relationship as a lifeline for him, a man shattered by a car accident that claimed his wife's life while he escaped unscathed. Chrissy explained how she tried to mend his broken spirit, how their connection deepened into love, and eventually, physical intimacy. She assured me her feelings for me hadn't changed and promised she would come back when this man no longer needed her. She vowed to remain present for our children and me, balancing her life between our family and her obligation to this man, who she believed would eventually move on. Her revelation felt like a sucker punch. In my stunned state, I lashed out, calling her names in a futile attempt to make sense of the betrayal. Chrissy's response was sharp. She accused me of failing to truly love and support her, throwing our wedding vows back in my face. She argued that if I loved her, I would accept this situation, as painful as it was. The conversation left me grappling with a storm of emotions, questioning everything I thought I knew about love, loyalty, and marriage. Chrissy was clearly disappointed and angry with me. I was furious, and to avoid punching her, I started drinking and yelling. Once I calmed down a bit, I asked how she would feel if I found another woman. "Who would want you?" Chrissy sneered. "You're an overweight, middle-aged man with thinning hair." She warned that if I tried to divorce her, she'd ruin me. I was livid and confused about what to do. My mind was in total meltdown, and I couldn't think logically. I kept drinking and raging at Chrissy. She packed a bag and said, "I'm leaving to be with my lover until you calm down and accept the situation." I didn't remember much after that. Sitting on our bed, I decided to take stock. Chrissy was right. I was middle-aged, my hair was thinning, and I was about 20 pounds overweight. I couldn't change my age, but I could do something about my hair and weight. First, I needed to find out where my kids were. It was Saturday morning, so they should be home. After searching the house, I realized they weren't there. Where had Chrissy taken them? I was about to call her parents when I heard a car in the driveway. It was Chrissy's car, and I saw our kids getting out. I met Chrissy at the door. "Good, you're sober," she snapped. "Where were the kids?" I asked. "They were with me. I couldn't leave them with you." "You didn't take them to your lover's house, did you?" I hissed. "Ron, watch your language," she snapped again. "They were already there. My friend is kind, unlike you yesterday. I wouldn't dare leave them with you." "Fair point," I admitted. "But why didn't you take the kids to your parents' place?" "They weren't home," Chrissy said as she went upstairs. I followed her. "Are you here to stay or going back to your lover?" "Oh, Ron, stop being childish. I've told you how things are going to be. I won't argue about it. The discussion is over. Accept it or don't. Even though you're acting like an idiot, I still love you. When he no longer needs me, I'll be back full time." "So what do we do now?" I struggled to stay calm. "Right now, I'm packing a few things to spend a few days with my friend until you cool down and accept the situation." "What about the kids?" I hoped to shame her into staying, but it didn't work. "If you don't want to watch them, call my parents. They will." Chrissy packed another bag and left, leaving my head ready to explode. However, I knew I had to keep it together for the kids. I wasn't going to take Chrissy's affair lying down. No self-respecting man would. After Chrissy left, I checked on the kids and asked if they had any homework. They all groaned, but agreed to get started when I promised we'd visit their grandparents, Chrissy's parents, after. The kids loved going there because Pop was helping them build go-karts. Chrissy's parents, Sam and Mary, lived on a small farm nearby. Sam, a retired tinkerer, had a large workshop where they worked on the go-karts. Sometimes I'd help too, being a certified mechanic at the local Ford dealership. I wanted to talk to Chrissy's parents to see if they knew about her boyfriend and get their advice. I had always had a great relationship with them and considered them my surrogate parents, since mine lived far away. However, I was worried they might side with Chrissy. I checked that the kids were doing their homework, and it struck me how much they meant to me. Ron, the oldest at 16, was a football player, but not big enough for a college scholarship. Sally, 15, was a typical teenager and a great student. Kyle, the youngest at 11, was a joyful accident and a happy-go-lucky child. While the kids worked, I made coffee and started a list of things to do. I called my boss, Bob Clarkson, to fill him in on my situation. I had worked at the dealership since it opened 23 years ago and Bob had been my boss for 15 years. He was sympathetic, having seen his son go through a messy divorce where his ex-wife made false accusations against him. "Damn," I said. "She is one cold witch." "Tell me about it," Bob said bitterly. "For a week we expected the police to arrest Gary. These accusations are devastating and hard to disprove. The police get scared every time a woman accuses a man. The only thing that saved Gary was his ex-mother-in-law. When Carol told her mother that Gary maltreated her granddaughter, she thought it would ruin him. Bev, known for being ruthless but fair, immediately took her granddaughter to the doctor to see if she had been maltreated. The doctor confirmed she had not. Bev went to the police and threatened to testify against her daughter if they pursued charges. She also warned Carol that she would expose her pills problems, leading to her losing custody. "God bless Bev," I said, shocked at what women could do to get their way. "Amen to that," Bob replied. "If there's anything I can do to help you, let me know. If it's within my power, I'll make it happen." I asked for the next week off, using my personal days and vacation time. Bob agreed and even offered more time if needed. "There is something else," I said. "I need a good divorce lawyer." "That's easy," Bob said. "Use the attorney my son used. He cleaned Carol's clock. Gary got primary custody, kept the house, and Carol has to pay child support. His name is Dwight Tucker. I think I have his number. The messier my son's divorce got, the more I heard Tucker's name in my sleep." Bob found Dwight Tucker's card after about a minute. I called his office, not expecting anyone to answer on a Saturday, but luck was with me. Not only was Mr. Tucker there, but his secretary told me he had a cancellation and could see me if I arrived in 30 minutes. I told the kids I had to go out for an hour and to behave. I drove to Mr. Tucker's office and made it in 20 minutes. Dwight Tucker, a good-looking man in his early or mid-30s with deep blue eyes and a welcoming smile, greeted me. I was sure he scored points with lady jurors. "What can I do for you today?" Dwight asked as I sat down. "My wife told me yesterday she's cheating on me with a younger man," I said, feeling embarrassed and angry. I explained what had happened the previous day. Dwight took notes, shaking his head. When I mentioned my wife claimed to still love me but planned to keep seeing the guy, he stopped me. "Let me get this straight," Dwight said, his eyes darkening. "Your wife says she loves you but will keep seeing this guy." Embarrassed, I nodded. "Okay, go ahead," Dwight prompted. I explained that Chrissy got angry when I refused to accept her plan. I admitted I called her a strumpet and a hooker. I painfully recounted how Chrissy laughed when I asked how she'd feel if I found another woman. She belittled me, saying no woman would want me and promised to ruin me if I tried to divorce her. "She actually said all that?" Dwight asked incredulously. "No offense, Mr. Fremont, but your wife is either extremely callous or has serious mental issues." "None taken," I sighed. "I think the same." I then told him how she left the kids at her lover's house during our argument, and they spent the night there. Dwight's head snapped up, and he smiled before jotting something down. "Now for the $64,000 question, what do you want to do?" Dwight asked, steepling his fingers. "I can't live with this situation," I replied after a moment. "I don't know if I can get past this, but I don't want to get destroyed in a divorce or lose my kids." Dwight nodded sympathetically. "That's common with women facing divorce due to their bad behavior. But I'll work hard to minimize any damage she can do. You'll get at least 50% of your joint assets. However, the courts don't care about infidelity, so you might have to pay alimony and child support." I felt deflated. Despite Dwight's assurance, it seemed I would be taken to the cleaners. "Yes, it's possible, but that's why we need to act quickly," Dwight said, studying his notes. "Your wife has abandoned the marital home and left your children at her lover's place, which is a big no-no in some courts. You currently have custody, and we can try to keep it that way. I'll seek an emergency restraining order against your wife, allowing you to stay in the house temporarily. The longer you stay, the stronger your case for primary custody. Does your wife work?" "Yes, part-time at the hospital on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays," I answered, then added, "That's probably where she met this guy." Dwight agreed and asked how much she made. I said about $25,000 a year, while I made about $80,000. "I have to ask a crucial question, and I want you to think hard," Dwight said, looking directly at me. "Do you still love her? Do you want to try to work things out?" I stared at the floor for a long time. When I looked up, tears were streaming down my face. "I do love her, but I can't accept this situation. She demeaned me and broke her vows. I just want a divorce." "Last question," Dwight said, turning to a clean sheet of paper. "Tell me about your assets." I quickly thought through our assets and explained. We had about $3,500 in checking, $44,000 in savings, and a $20,000 CD. I had roughly $150,000 in my 401k, while Chrissy had slightly less in her retirement plan from her full-time job at the hospital. Despite the hospital's generally better benefits, my company offered a superior healthcare plan, which we used. We also had 2 cars in both our names and a house with little equity, as we maxed out the loan when we bought it a few years ago. "Here's what I want you to do," Dwight said, looking ready for battle. "Withdraw half of the savings, checking, and CD amounts and put it in a separate account in your name only." "I can't touch the CD without Chrissy's signature," I explained. "No problem," Dwight said, calculating. "Take $33,750 from savings, pay as many house bills as you can from checking, cancel joint credit cards, and get a new one in your name only." "I still have a credit card from before we were married," I said. "I don't use it much because our joint card offers cash back." "Even better," Dwight smiled. "You won't need a new card." Dwight wrote a list of instructions and handed it to me. "Go to my secretary and have her call Taylor Locksmith to change your house locks. Then come back and we'll go over the next steps." Miss Carlson quickly got Taylor Locksmith on the phone. They said they'd come around noon. I returned to Dwight's office as he finished a call. "We're in luck," he said. "If I fax my paperwork today, we'll get Judge Johnson." "Why is that lucky?" I asked. "He hates cheaters," Dwight smiled. "He's an old-fashioned Bible Belt judge who despises infidelity. This works in our favor. If he wasn't available, I would have had to work harder, but Judge Johnson was a friend of my father's. He won't mind if I call him at home." Dwight stood up and offered me his hand. I shook it gratefully. "Before you head home," Dwight instructed, "go take care of your bank stuff. I'm preparing a petition for an emergency restraining order against your wife. She won't be allowed in your house or within 500 feet of you or your children. Since she's with her lover and left your kids there, that should help with the order. It might be overturned later, but by then, you'll be established as the primary caregiver. By Friday, I'll have her served with divorce papers. Then we'll see how she responds." For the first time since Chrissy dropped her bombshell, I felt like I was taking back control. The bank wasn't busy, so I quickly got a cashier's check for my share of the money and closed our joint credit card, paying off its $537 balance from the checking account. I also paid the mortgage 2 months ahead, which used up another $2,600. With the cashier's check in hand, I went to another bank and opened accounts in my name only. When I got home, the kids were watching TV. I loaded them into the car and drove to my in-laws. Sam waved from his workshop as the kids ran to him. Inside, Mary greeted me with a kiss. A minute later, Sam joined us. "I have something hard to say," I began. "Chrissy is having an affair, and I'm filing for a divorce." "I don't believe you," Sam said sharply. "What proof do you have?" "She told me," I replied softly, tears sliding down my face. Just then, the kids came in. "Please stay outside for a few minutes," I told them. "Why, Ron? Ron asked. "Because I said so," I said more sharply than I intended. Ron saw my tears and immediately pushed his siblings back out. "She told you?" Mary asked in disbelief. "Yes," I said firmly. I recounted the previous evening, including Chrissy's threats and insults. They were shocked and Sam was angry. "I still don't believe it. I'm going to call her and put it on speakerphone." Sam dialed Chrissy and put the phone on the coffee table. "Hey, Daddy," Chrissy answered brightly. "What can I do for you?" "Ron is here," Sam said. "Are you having an affair?" After a long pause, Chrissy demanded, "What did he say?" "He said you're having lovemaking with another man and that you love him." "It's complicated, Daddy," she pleaded. "I'm trying to help this man who's suffered a terrible tragedy." Sam's face turned red. "Are you having lovemaking with him or not?" "We've had lovemaking, but I still love Ron. I can't abandon this man right now. I love him too." I was stunned. Chrissy had always been a daddy's girl, and I assumed Sam would make excuses for her. "Chrissy," Sam's voice was strangled, "I never thought my daughter would become an immoral woman." "Daddy, please," Chrissy pleaded, but Sam hung up. Moments later, the phone rang again. Mary moved to answer it. "Leave it alone," Sam commanded, but Mary grabbed it anyway. Sam snatched the phone from her hand and threw it against the fireplace. "I said, leave it alone!" he screamed. She was stunned by her husband's anger and backed away. I was equally shocked. Silence filled the room as Sam and Mary processed the news. Finally, Sam hugged me. "Ron, I am so sorry. I can't believe our daughter did this to you. We will help you in any way we can. Mary will talk to her later and let you know how it goes. Right now, I'm too angry to speak with her. I had to leave to meet the locksmith. After herding the kids into the car, I hugged Sam and Mary and invited them for dinner to discuss more. On the way home, Sally burst into tears. "Are you and Mom getting a divorce?" "Where did you hear that?" I asked. "From me," Ron said defiantly. I snuck back in and listened. I sighed, realizing they deserved to know. But how to tell them without causing too much damage? Damn Chrissy. She hadn't thought about the kids when she was with her new man. "Yes, it looks like your mother and I will be getting a divorce," I said softly. "But why?" Kyle cried. "Your mother has fallen in love with another man," I explained. "You mean she's having lovemaking with another man?" Sally said through tears. "I hate her. She's a total witch." "Sally, don't say that about your mother," I admonished, though I felt the same way. The locks were changed just in time. 10 minutes later, Chrissy came roaring into the driveway. "You told my parents, didn't you? I'm sure you called me a strumpet and a hooker," Chrissy screamed. "I thought you loved me, Chrissy," I said sadly. "I love you with all my heart, but I won't accept you being with another man. You hurt me deeply when you called me an ugly middle-aged guy that no other woman would want. Your pity love I can do without. You also threatened to ruin me. How can you say you love me? If you truly believe what you're doing is right, it shouldn't matter that your parents know." Chrissy looked stricken. "Okay, I'm sorry. I didn't mean those things," she tried to apologize. "I was just angry because you called me a strumpet and a hooker. You promised to love, honor, and cherish me. Shame on you. If you loved me, you'd accept the situation. I'm not leaving you for him. I just love him too, and I'm trying to help him. He's younger and will eventually move on." "Chrissy," I said, shaking my head, "if you're going to quote our vows, remember you promised to forsake all others. A married woman doesn't sleep with young men just because they're hurting. I've accepted that you are damaged goods, and I don't want you in my life anymore. Accept it or don't. That's your choice." Chrissy turned red and seemed uncertain, but then her eyes narrowed with renewed arrogance. She was breathing hard, clearly trying to figure out her next argument. At that moment, I wished I didn't love her, but I still did. Deeply. "Ron," Chrissy said in a tone she used with the children, "stop being an idiot. I'm your wife, I love you, and I will come back to you when this man is well again." I was so sad, but my love for her had turned to pure hatred. "No, Chrissy, I don't know you. My wife was loving and faithful. You, I don't recognize. For all I know, this is just one of many affairs. I can't trust you anymore." Chrissy's face flushed with anger. "This is not an affair, and he's the first person I've been with since we married. He's hurt, and I will help him whether you agree or not. Suit yourself. I don't accept this. I don't trust you, so I will have a DNA test done on the kids to ensure they are mine." "You are a total prick," Chrissy spat. "This is going to get very ugly. Remember what I told you would happen if you try to divorce me?" "I'd rather die in poverty than be with a woman without morals," I said, looking down at her. She seemed unaware of the consequences coming her way. At that moment, a sheriff's vehicle pulled up. The deputy approached Chrissy. "Are you Chrissy Jameson?" he asked. "Yes," Chrissy responded, confused. "Ma'am, this is a restraining order. You cannot enter the house and must stay 500 feet away. Do you understand?" "But that's my home," Chrissy sputtered. "All my things are inside." "You have 15 minutes to gather your stuff," the deputy said. I nodded in agreement. "I'll take my children to the backyard," I said. "I want to see my children," Chrissy said frantically. "Ma'am," the deputy said, "the restraining order is to protect your children from you." Chrissy turned to me furious. "You did this! You're taking my children away." "No, Chrissy, you did this," I said calmly. "You abandoned our house and left our children unattended at your lover's place." "I didn't abandon our house, and he's a wonderful man," Chrissy screamed. "I'm helping him by sleeping with him." "If he's so wonderful, go live with him and give him your love, or does he just want to use you for cheap pleasure?" I responded, more for the deputy's benefit than Chrissy's. I took the kids to the backyard and told them their mother was gathering her things to take to her new man's house, but I would let them see her before she left. When I brought them out front, Kyle was crying hard and rushed into his mother's arms, begging her not to leave. "Please, Ron," Chrissy sobbed. "Can't you see what you're doing to the children?" Anger flared in me, but I forced it down. "Don't talk about the kids. I haven't done anything to them. You took them to your lover's house while you were with him." "Ron, why can't you understand that I can't abandon him?" Chrissy said, crying. "Chrissy, you already abandoned your husband, your kids, and your home. It's time we did the same to you." You didn't consider the consequences of your actions, and now you're facing them." Ron Jr. asked. "Why?" Chrissy tried to explain to her son, but it was clear he didn't believe her. Sally, however, let her mother have it. "You're nothing but a selfish witch," she said, spitting on her mother's face. I had to grab Sally to prevent her from punching Chrissy and demanded she apologize, but she refused. Chrissy was blindsided and dropped to the ground, sobbing. Sally and Chrissy had been clashing lately, which I thought was just teenage rebellion. Now I feared Chrissy had permanently damaged their relationship. As I held Sally, Chrissy got up, ran to her car, and drove away, banging the steering wheel. Kyle tried to run after her, screaming, "Mommy, please don't leave us." Ron Jr. caught him and brought him back. The deputy looked at me sadly. "Mr. Jameson, I am really sorry for what you're going through." That night, Sam and Mary came over for dinner. I planned to grill burgers, but Mary took over the kitchen and made meatloaf and her famous macaroni and cheese, which the kids loved. While Mary cooked, Sam and I had a couple of beers in the living room. He was clearly distraught over his daughter's actions. I explained the restraining order and how Chrissy had left the kids unattended at her lover's place, which saddened Sam even more. "Mary spoke to Chrissy about an hour after you left," Sam said finally. "How did that go?" I asked. "Terrible," Sam admitted. "Mary tried to reason with Chrissy, but she's convinced she's right and we're all wrong. She thinks we're horrible people. Mary got really angry and told Chrissy not to call us anymore and that she would testify against her if it went to court." As you can imagine, the meal was very subdued. The only bright spot was when Sam invited the kids over to work on their go-karts the next day, which brought smiles to Ron Jr. and Kyle. Sally, however, sat with a pissed look and didn't eat. I let it go, knowing she was hurting as much as I was. On Friday, Chrissy was served with divorce papers at the hospital. Friends there told me she lost it, swearing at the process server and vowing to ruin me. She was sent home, or rather to her lover's house. Chrissy hired a lawyer, Amber Wright, whom Dwight knew. He said she wasn't as good as she thought. Amber tried to rescind the restraining order, but Judge Johnson only modified it, allowing Chrissy supervised visits at the house without her boyfriend present. He warned her that any violation would end her visitation rights. Chrissy was initially happy, but her joy faded when the judge ordered her to pay child support, forcing her to go back to work full-time. Despite her blow-up at the hospital, they would likely take her back due to the nursing shortage and her skills. After the hearing, the DNA results arrived. It took me almost half a day to open the envelope. When I did, I was filled with happiness. My kids were truly mine. I reread the report several times to reassure myself. I realized I would love my kids no matter what the results had been. Even if Chrissy left her lover and came home, I wouldn't forgive her. She was a bad influence and needed to be kept away from the kids. I used all my personal days and vacation time to stay with the kids. When that ran out, Chrissy's parents helped. Sam and Mary refused to talk to Chrissy until she came to her senses. After a week of multiple daily calls, Sam blocked her number. The visitation schedule was left for Chrissy and me to work out, which meant our attorneys communicated our wishes. We agreed that Chrissy could visit on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday between 6 and 7 in the evening. Mary volunteered to supervise, but I insisted on being there for the first visit to set clear rules. On the first Monday, Chrissy arrived in a car I didn't recognize, likely her lover's. She approached the house nervously and smiled tentatively. "Hello, Ron. How are you? Mother, it's good to see you." "Chrissy, you have to leave," I snapped. "The judge said your lover can't be within 500 feet of this house." Horror spread over her face. But he was just dropping me off." "Are you brain dead?" I was furious. "The judge was clear. No lover here. Tell him to leave now and I won't tell the judge." Chrissy nodded quickly and went back to the car. I walked out and copied the license plate number, then returned to the porch as the car drove off. "Okay, he'll pick me up later," Chrissy said defiantly. "Tell him to meet you down the street. I don't want him near the house." Chrissy's face filled with anger. "Ron, I'm tired of how you're treating me. You didn't have to steal money from our checking account or cancel my credit card." "Chrissy, I didn't steal anything. The money was used to pay off the credit card and make 2 mortgage payments. I wanted to ensure the kids had a place to stay while we sorted things out. As for canceling the credit card, I didn't want to be stuck with any expenses you might charge while with your lover." Chrissy's face flushed with anger and arrogance. "This is not an affair and he isn't my lover. You're being a prick." Before I could respond, Mary stepped forward and slapped Chrissy across the face. Both Chrissy and I were stunned as she stepped back, bewildered, staring at her mother. "Chrissy, If you ever disrespect Ron again, I will tear that dress off you and slap your bum red. If you want to see the kids in the living room, I'll talk to Ron first and then join you. Be warned. If you say or do anything wrong, I will throw you out of this house." Chrissy nodded meekly and went inside. "Ron, I apologize for my brain-dead daughter," Mary said sympathetically. "Thanks for sticking up for me," I said gratefully, and then I left. 2 weeks later, the restraining order was lifted, as Dwight had mentioned. By then, I was established as the primary caregiver and allowed to stay in the house. Chrissy continued seeing her lover, so her child support remained. She could have unsupervised visits with the kids in public, but couldn't take them to her lover's house or have him present. After 4 months of delays, our first court date to finalize the divorce arrived. Before the attorneys spoke, Judge Johnson asked if we had attended counseling. The attorneys admitted we hadn't, so the judge ordered 8 sessions of marital counseling. Neither Chrissy nor I opposed. I thought they were a waste of time, but didn't want to anger the judge. Chrissy seemed to believe she could convince me or the therapist that her actions were justified. The first session with therapist Ann Patterson was as I expected. Chrissy spent most of the hour explaining that what she was doing was the Christian thing to do. Ann looked shocked by Chrissy's arrogance. In the second week, Ann gently questioned Chrissy's arguments, asking if it would be fair if I started having lovemaking with another woman. I cringed, expecting an attack on my manhood, but this time, it didn't happen. Chrissy didn't answer right away, but I didn't care. During the drawn-out divorce, I made some changes. When the woman you love tells you you're not good enough, you want to prove her wrong. So I had hair transplant surgery. It cost about $4,000, and I debated it, not wanting to face teasing. But since I was still on vacation, I went for it. My hair was buzz cut, then plugs from the back were planted in the front. I stayed home for the first week, telling the kids it was a minor medical procedure. After 10 days, I looked like my old self, and my hair grew longer each week. After healing, I started exercising and running. Initially, I could only run half a mile, but eventually, I could run 10. I also joined a gym and changed our meals to healthier options. The kids complained at first, missing fast food, cookies, ice cream, and pizza. I found fun, healthy recipes online, and while some didn't turn out great, we laughed, scrapped them, and made sandwiches. Cooking together became a family activity. Despite the pain from Chrissy's betrayal, I began feeling better about myself. On my first day back at work, I got an ego boost. The receptionist, Trudy, gave me a strange look, but didn't tease me about my new hair. "Welcome back, Ron," she chirped. Then her eyes began examining me. "There's something different about you." I blushed a bit. "Oh, I've been on a diet. I've lost 18 pounds. I'm aiming to lose another 5. She laughed and nodded. "Well, it really suits you. If I weren't married, I'd be all over you." Thanks for the ego boost, but according to my wife, I'm just a middle-aged man with no lovemaking appeal. So much so, she's found herself a lover. I tried to make a joke out of it, but it fell flat. By now, everyone at the company knew about my situation. Storm clouds crossed over Trudy's eyes. "Chrissy is an idiot. Either that or she's got a screw loose. You're a great guy, Ron, and plenty of women would be thrilled to have you. Don't let Chrissy get in your head." That was the best boost I'd gotten in months. Suddenly, I didn't feel like such a loser. I snapped back to the present when Ann asked my wife again, "Chrissy, how would you feel if Ron came home and told you he was sleeping with another woman?" As I mentioned, I was waiting for Chrissy to attack my manhood. But she didn't. I did see her eyeing me during our first meeting. I guess she could no longer say that I had thinning hair and was overweight. That was another boost to my ego. Anyway, I just sat in my chair and waited as Chrissy seemed to think about what to say. She couldn't very well say that I couldn't have another woman if she had another man. "I guess if he was trying to help that woman get over some tragedy," she said with arrogance, "I would be okay with it. What if he told you that he loved this woman and that the lovemaking was very good?" "Again, I would accept it," Chrissy insisted. "However, he would have to assure me that the children and I would be taken care of." The session continued like that, with Ann trying to get Chrissy to see that her position was really ridiculous. But Chrissy refused to budge. As I feared, these sessions were just a waste of time. Chrissy was just going to use them to try to convince me that she was right. That was never going to happen. And as it was, the initial shock of what Chrissy was doing had begun to wear off. It's a funny thing about love. If it isn't nurtured, it begins to die. By the third week, something had changed. Chrissy came into the session much subdued and said little. Mostly, she just listened. Whatever had changed, it had set Chrissy back a bit. Maybe she wasn't as arrogant now because Ann was calmly and compassionately challenging her premise at every point. I also saw Chrissy checking me out when she didn't think I'd notice. I continued to work out and lost a few more pounds. I'd even begun doing a lot of yard work, which had given me a great tan. A couple of months before the therapy sessions had been ordered, I made another change. I was becoming dissatisfied with my job. Oh, I loved fixing cars, and not just the engines. I got tremendous satisfaction from doing body work. I'd been fixing up old cars since I was 14 years old. I could do it all now. I saw owning my own business as a way to spend more time with my kids. I talked it over with Sam, and he agreed to help me. I wanted to set up my own shop and start building a business. But I couldn't just quit my job and do it. I didn't have the money to sustain us until the business took off. We'd starve before I could make a go of it. However, since Sam's farm was also in an industrial zone, he agreed to let me start my business in his workshop. Actually, Sam's tinkering shop had once been a barn for horses that he had converted. There was plenty of space for Sam and me if I got the business established. Sam agreed to lease me a piece of land on the road to build my own building. I spent time at work studying how they had things set up. The dealership was basically set up to handle a higher volume than I was anticipating. They did a little body work at the dealership, but much of it was subbed out. With this in mind, I scaled down what I needed in terms of tools and equipment. One thing for sure, I'd need to build a paint booth. Sam was not only okay with that, but actually helped me construct it. I spent the savings I had liberated from our joint savings plus a small loan from Sam to finance the venture. I started part-time, mostly on weekends and evenings. It was fun, and the kids would come out many times to watch or even help. I really enjoyed teaching Ron Jr. how to do things. Even Sally got her hands dirty and loved to tell her girlfriends how she helped change out an engine or help paint a Corvette. That also made her more interesting to the boys at school. I got business by word of mouth, and soon I was wondering if I shouldn't strike out full-time. That decision actually came to a head when I was told that they needed me to work over the weekend to get some backed-up workout. I couldn't do it because I had customers of my own that I needed to take care of. I figured I was going to get fired when I went in to tell Bob that I couldn't work because I had my own business obligations. "Got a minute, Bob?" I asked, poking my head into his office. "Sure, Ron." He waved me in. "I'm glad you're working this weekend. We've got 44 cars coming in on Friday that need to be thoroughly checked and prepped. We have to get them out by the end of the month." I winced slightly at that. Most people don't realize that factories offer special incentives to dealerships. If they sell a certain number of cars in a month, they get a discount off the invoice. For example, the factory might say if you sell 300 vehicles this month, we'll take $150 off your cost. That's a $45000 saving. But if the dealership sells only 299, they get nothing. This was crucial for the dealership. "That's just it, Bob," I said, feeling sweat trickle down my back. "I can't work this weekend. I've kind of started my own business on weekends and I've got commitments." "I'm sorry, Ron," Bob said curtly, "but if you can't work this weekend, I may have to let you go." "I understand, Bob," I said resignedly. "I just hope there are no hard feelings. I've been trying to build up a business of my own. I want to spend more time with my kids and make some extra money for their college funds. I'll clean out my locker." "I hate to lose you, Ron," Bob said sadly. "Tell me about your business. Where are you located and what kind of jobs are you doing?" I explained that I had set up my operation on my father-in-law's property and described the equipment and tools I had. I was set up to do almost any kind of car repairs, including body work. "Go get yourself a cup of coffee and then come back here," Bob said, reaching for his phone. I didn't want any coffee, so I went to my locker and put my things in a box. Losing this job meant it was going to be tough for a while. The kids would have to be put on Chrissy's health insurance plan as I had taken her off mine. Still, I was confident I could make it. I was turning away almost as much business as I was taking in. Bob motioned me into his office when he saw me coming down the hall. "I've got a deal for you, Ron," he said excitedly. "If you work this weekend, we'll reimburse you for any money you lose because your customers are unhappy." "No," I shook my head. "I couldn't do that to my customers." "Hold on. I'm not done," Bob said, sliding a piece of paper across the desk. It was an independent contractor's agreement. "I really need you this weekend. I also think you can convince your customers to wait a few days. If you can do that and your shop passes our inspection, we'll hire you as an independent contractor to do some of our body work." I was stunned, but took the deal. After that weekend, I was basically working full-time at my business. Occasionally, I would go into the dealership if they had a problem and I wasn't busy. Also, Sam started helping me part-time and Mary agreed to do my books. I was now making more money than I ever had working for the dealership. The only thing still messed up in my life was my marriage, and after the 4th counseling session, I wanted to end them. I was pretty much beyond caring what Chrissy was doing with her new love. Oh, don't get me wrong, it still stung when I thought about my wife being with another man, but I wasn't thinking about it as often. In our 5th session, I decided to go on the offensive. I figured if I attacked Chrissy hard enough, she might choose to end these useless sessions. I decided to confront her on the most hurtful things she had said, that I was too ugly to attract another woman. When Anne asked if I had anything to say, I lit into Chrissy. Chrissy, I've decided that you're not only selfish, but also very nasty. How dare you tell the man you supposedly love that he's an ugly, middle-aged man no woman would ever want? You hurt me in a way that I don't think I'll ever get over. Oh God, Ron, I'm so sorry, she sobbed. I'm so ashamed I ever said that. If I could take it back, I would. I do love you. Just not enough to give up your lover. Keep your sorries to yourself. You'll need them more than I do, I snapped back. Chrissy burst into uncontrollable sobbing. No matter what Anne or I said, we couldn't calm her down. Eventually, Anne called an end to the session but gave us homework to do before the next one. I wasn't looking forward to it because I figured these sessions were a total waste of time. The homework was to answer a series of questions. Some made sense, like how was our relationship with our parents? How was our bed life? Some questions didn't make sense to me, like what my favorite food and drink were or what kind of vehicle I drove. But one question really made me sit back and think. It was, if I could change one thing, what would it be? I had been working on the questionnaire the night after the last session, but put it away after I read that question. I wanted to think about it for a bit. The next day, I finally wrote that I wished I had been a better husband, so my wife wouldn't have stopped loving me. We handed in our papers at the next session, but Anne didn't even look at them. Instead, she started by asking if we had any questions or if there was something we'd like to discuss. I'd like to ask Chrissy a question, I said immediately. Anne nodded at me, and I turned to face my estranged wife. Chrissy, I don't see that we're getting anywhere with these sessions. You've made it clear that you're not going to leave your friend Bruce Hartman, and that leaves no chance for reconciliation. Why don't we just stop this and get the divorce done? How do you know his name? Chrissy asked in shock. That first time you came over to visit the kids, I got his license number. After that, it wasn't hard to find out his name, but it doesn't really matter. I have no interest in getting back at him or even talking to him. I just don't care anymore. I want to move on. Chrissy looked up at me with the saddest eyes I think I've ever seen. I hated seeing her in pain, and I wanted to go over and hug her, but I knew that wouldn't solve anything. So I continued. I know your lawyer hasn't been happy with the settlement I've offered so far. Well, I've told my attorney to offer some alternatives. I'm willing to give you more visitation with the kids. I'm also offering to pay you $1,000 a month in alimony for 3 years. I just want you out at any cost. I watched Chrissy for a reaction, but all I saw was terrible sadness. She had made it perfectly clear that she wasn't going to stop seeing the guy, and I couldn't and wouldn't accept my wife having lovemaking with another man. For the life of me, I just didn't understand how she could possibly think that I would live with a situation like that. At this point, it didn't matter. I just wanted out. I decided to push to end this farce. I know that what you said about me was partially true. It did hurt like hell when you said it, and I did tell you that I didn't think I'd ever get over that. But as time goes on, I realize that I am getting over it. Anyway, as you can see, I've tried to fix myself up. I don't think that I'm the man you thought so little of when you took up with Bruce. I've also started dating. After we're divorced, you can take care of your gentleman friend for as long as you want. But I think it's time to end this, if for no other reason than so you can start to rebuild a relationship with your kids. With that, Chrissy burst into tears and fled the room. Anne looked as stunned as I was. Finally, Anne composed herself and told me that she wanted to see Chrissy by herself for the next session, and then me alone for the last session. With a sigh, I agreed. When Chrissy unloaded all this on me, I was furious and filled with hate. But now, months after the fact, I was just worn out. I could see the pain this whole thing was inflicting on not only me, but Chrissy, her parents, and most of all, our children. I wanted that to stop. I also was no longer furious that Chrissy was having lovemaking with some guy. When I arrived for my final meeting with Anne, I was not only happy that Chrissy wasn't there, but also glad that this would be the end of the counseling. Ron, I want to commend you for your restraint through all these sessions, Anne began. I know this entire situation has been unbelievably painful for you. After meeting with Chrissy last week, I think I finally understand what happened to your wife. I was now sitting on the edge of my chair. Finally, maybe I would learn why Chrissy decided to destroy our marriage. Do you remember the homework I gave you? She asked. I just nodded. I had forgotten about it and figured it had been of little value in these counseling sessions. The way you both answered one particular question surprised me, Anne said as she pulled 2 pieces of paper from her folder. The question was, if you could change one thing, what would it be? Do you remember that? I nodded. You answered that you wished you could have been a better husband so that your wife wouldn't have stopped loving you. When Chrissy heard that, she broke down and cried harder than ever. It took me quite a while to calm her down. I didn't know what to think, say, or do, so I just sat there. Ron, your wife never stopped loving you. Yeah, that's why she continues sleeping with Bruce, because she loved me so much, I said sarcastically. Anne gave me a disapproving look, but then sighed. Ron, what I discovered about Chrissy was that she was going through a severe midlife crisis. As the children were getting older, Chrissy felt her life slipping away from her. She is, and I suspect she has always been, a warm and caring person. Somewhere along the line, she found Bruce, who needed her terribly. She confused her desire to be young again and Bruce's terrible need for forgiveness over his wife's pass away for love. That doesn't change anything, I protested. She's still sleeping with Bruce. Actually, no, she's not, Ron. Really? This was news to me. Then why didn't Chrissy tell me? Anne sighed. I know this isn't going to change your feelings at this point, but you need to know the whole truth. Bruce left town the same day you told Chrissy you were going to start dating and just wanted to get on with the divorce. She figured she had already lost you. I thought about it, but Anne was right. It didn't change my mind. Too much had happened to go back. I had my life on track now, and I wanted to move forward. I could never trust Chrissy again, and I didn't want to live like that. Most importantly, I wanted the kids to start bonding with their mother again. Sally's grades had slipped badly since this mess began, and she was still angry at her mother. Kyle had become sullen, withdrawn, and was acting out in school. This was perhaps the worst consequence of Chrissy's actions. Kyle was no longer the happy-go-lucky kid he once was. Ron Jr. handled it the best. He wasn't angry or sullen, but whenever his mother's name came up, he changed the subject. Maybe I'm wrong. Perhaps his reaction is worse than the 2 girls. I just don't know. One last thing, Ron, Anne said, pulling out the second piece of paper. This is Chrissy's answer to the question about changing one thing. She wrote that if she could change one thing, it would be that she never met Bruce Hartman. The divorce went through, and as per the agreement, Chrissy visited the kids on Wednesdays and Fridays. I made sure to take the kids out on Fridays before Chrissy arrived. At first, our interactions were formal and awkward, but then we started sharing meals together with the kids. And one evening, Chrissy asked if she could stay the night. No, I answered with a chuckle. The bed in the spare room isn't that comfortable. It's better if you go back to your place. And next time, don't think I'd ever be alone with you. As for Bruce Hartman, his story wasn't completely true. His wife died driving away from him after finding him cheating. She left in rage, speeding, and died in a car crash. Why did he leave town? I guess it was because of a severe striking he took outside a local bar. 5 broken ribs, 1 busted kneecap, 5 missing teeth, and 2 busted nuts. I had to call in a favor with some friends. It was worth it. The striking ensured he would never be with another woman, let alone please any. As for Chrissy, she gradually restored a loving relationship with her children, or I should say with Sally and Kyle. No matter what Chrissy did, there was always a distance between her and Ron Jr. I would have thought Sally would hold a grudge, but she was the first to fully embrace her mother's return. Chrissy finally mended her fences with her parents, though like Ron Jr., there was a slight coolness with her father. Most Sundays we'd have dinner there like a family, but we weren't. Chrissy kept apologizing for everything that had happened. I finally told her to please stop. I will never forgive you, and it's useless to try, I told her. Oh, please, Chrissy, stop being so childish. I told you how things are going to be. I have no intention of arguing about it. The discussion is over. Accept it or don't. That's your choice. We are never getting back together again. Even if you were the last woman on the planet and the fate of mankind depended on me making love to you, I'd pass. 3 years later, I got married. I married Sally's teacher. How we met and everything that happened is a story for another time. But what matters is that the kids love her and have accepted her as part of the family. Chrissy still hasn't accepted that I've moved on. Well, I'm not going to do anything about her. After all, the discussion was over. She either accepts it or she doesn't.